want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. One minor detail is that Tom Fennell is not here. He would say in the flesh if he were. He's unfortunately feeling a little under the weather today, so we're hoping that he will be getting well soon and in next week, but I'm going to have to do the show by myself. This show is being recorded on the 3rd of March, 2022, and the materials that we have start on February 24th, Thursday, a week ago today. Obviously, for those who have seen this show before, and for those who are just visiting the first time, I guess the show is made up of news bits that come off of the daily news from day to day. There's about 3 of them every day. And I put them up on my blog, geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com, where you can go and read them. But also, if you scroll down on the screen that you're looking at, you should see a file that can be downloaded that has the contents of the show with links, so you can go to the articles. There's also a website that you can go to with links, so you can actually read any particular article that you think you might want to read. And that having been said, Tom would say that some of these are definitely worth reading, and I think that's absolutely true. This week, obviously, we have had the unusual activity of the invasion of the Ukraine having an effect on the energy markets. And so we'll start on February 24th on Thursday with an item from CNN. And the title for that is Oil Hits $100. U.S. stock futures slide after Putin announces military operation in Donbass. Brent crude oil hit $100 a barrel, and stock futures fell sharply on Wednesday after blasts were heard in the Ukraine, and Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a military operation on Donbass, which is an area in the Ukraine. Obviously, since this article appeared, the military operations in the Ukraine have become much more extensive. Dow futures lost nearly 700 points, or about 2%. The NASDAQ futures dropped about 2.7%. I was a little surprised when I read this because I would have expected a larger fall of stock values. But the real question here is what's going to happen in terms of oil and gas and nuclear power, as we're going to see. Russia gets 2/3 of its foreign trade income, and it's dependent on its foreign trade income. I'm going to give you a picture of this. Whoops. I'm going to give you a picture of what we're looking at here in the background. Russia gets 2/3 of its foreign trade income from the sale of fossil fuels, mostly oil and gas. And this is a problem for them because of the major gas lines that go through Eastern Europe to get to Western Europe from Russia. The majority of them, I think 2/3 of them, or 3/4, actually go through the Ukraine. So if the Ukrainians don't protect those, the Russians could have their source of income cut off. And Putin is taking a very big chance here because of that, because these gas lines could be vandalized. But things have got worse from the time this particular article was filed. Our second article for that day is from CNN. The USPS, which is the United States Post Office, finalizing a plan to replace fleet with 90% gas-powered vehicles is the title. The U.S. Postal Service is moving ahead with a plan to replace its current fleet with 90% gas-powered trucks and 10% battery EVs after the EPA and the White House objected and asked for a further study of emissions. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy said more EVs were not funded. Louis DeJoy was appointed to this position, by the way, by Donald Trump. He's not a Biden appointee, and he has been very much opposed to the use of EVs, electric vehicles, especially for the post office. And he wants to keep the fleet of gasoline-powered trucks, maintain a fleet of gasoline-powered trucks. The new trucks that they're buying are going to be used for a very long time. So there's some worry about the fact that they could last for literally for decades. And the overall life cost of the gasoline-powered trucks is very much in excess of what it is for the electric vehicles. But the electric vehicles, at the purchase price of the electric vehicles is higher, considerably higher. The electric vehicles are cheaper because they require very little maintenance, and they use very little fuel. If you want to take a fuel equivalent of the equivalent of gasoline, and see how they're doing, their cost is very much lower. And this is similar to what you see with electric powered buses, where in foreign countries, electric powered buses are being used extensively because even though they cost 50% more to buy, the difference in cost is paid off in about 3 years. And the postal trucks would be of the same type of system. I think I should just go to the next item here. This is from the Straits Times, which is a publication that appears from Singapore. The title is European Renewable Energy Firm Plans to Invest $10 billion in Singapore by 2030. And this company, I believe, is Australian, which would mean that possibly they're talking about Australian dollars. I think they're actually talking about American dollars here. So 10 billion means 10 billion. If it's Australian dollars, it would be about 7.5 billion. EDP Renewables, the world's fourth largest renewable energy producer, will invest $10 billion by 2030 to establish its Asia-Pacific headquarters in Singapore while continuing to develop new clean energy projects across the region, the company said. And the picture that we have here, let me put that up. The picture that we have here is a picture of the Sunseap floating solar farm, which this picture accompanied the article. And the article talked about this, and I believe a second one. And these floating solar farms are valuable because they mean that Singapore has very little available land that can be developed, and solar power requires use of land. And that's a conflict. It's an ecological conflict. And, there are areas of Singapore that are basically kind of like ecological parks where animals and plants can live in a wild ecological system. And they don't really have a lot of land to dedicate to solar or wind power for that matter. Singapore has got a very, very, very dense population, but it's surrounded by water. And so the hope is that they'll be able to use floating solar farms, such as the one that you see here, to give themselves power over an extended period of time. And that is, they're looking at a lot of alternatives in Singapore. One of them, of course, is the alternative that Tom and I have reported in the past, that, for example, they could bring renewably produced electric power from Western Australia using a submarine cable that would be something like 1,000 miles long. They also have looked into getting their electricity from Malaysia, which is on their border, basically. But the power coming from Australia would be more predictable, I think is probably a good way to put it. So we have come up to Friday, February 25th here, and we have an article from BBC and a picture of what is said to be on the slide Chernobyl. I believe this is the city of Pripyat, which is in the Ukraine. It is the home of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. I want to draw your attention to the buildings there and the fact that they all look dead. They're not inhabited. They have been abandoned. Nobody is supposed to be living in them, but they have a dead look to them. And I saw that, and it occurred to me pretty soon that the reason for the dead appearance is that the windows in those buildings are not reflecting any light from the sky or from trees or from anything. And the reason for that is because many of the windows, maybe most of them, have been broken. And a lot of the windows are just so dirty that they don't reflect easily. So for this article is from the BBC, and the title of the article is Russian Forces Seize Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. The Russian military forces seized the control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, according to Ukrainian officials. A presidential advisor said the, quote, totally pointless attack, end quote, on Thursday amounted to, quote, one of the most serious threats in Europe today, end quote. The danger goes far beyond the borders of the Ukraine. What they're basically worried about here is that this nuclear plant, which has 3 reactors, I believe it's 3 reactors that did not melt down, plus one that exploded, is even today, it is a place that could cause a lot of contamination. And in fact, there was a lot of contamination when the Russian forces went in, because their armor and their trucks and so forth were stirring up dust and soil in the area around Chernobyl, and that dust and soil is still contaminated. So there was a spike in radiation readings that should not have been there. This was something that was discernible by people who were not Russian or Ukrainian. And it was just a spike. It declined after their activity subsided a bit. But nevertheless, there's a threat that if something goes wrong at Chernobyl, it could basically duplicate the problem that Chernobyl has had all along. And that problem, when the Chernobyl plant exploded, it contaminated agricultural crops in Scotland and Finland, upwind, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. So this is something to consider. And the problem that we've got is that any nuclear plant in a war situation could be a target. It could be blown up. It could melt down for reasons that are just out of control of anybody. So there is that. Our next item comes from Los Alamos Daily Post, and we have a picture here of the Western Spirit Wind Facility. The title is New Mexico Grand Opening of Pattern Energy's Western Spirit Wind, largest renewable project in U.S. history. Obviously, this picture is a picture of the project that has just opened up, and they say it is the largest in American history. It's a 1,050 megawatt project. Let me read the synopsis here. Pattern Energy Group LP commissioned its Western Spirit wind power facilities. Western Spirit Wind consists of 4 wind projects with a total capacity of over 1,050 megawatts, enough to power the annual needs of 900,000 Americans. I did not actually check to see that figure of that this actually is the largest renewable energy project in the United States. I think that might depend on how you define renewable energy, because I think there have been water power projects that are larger. But nevertheless, it's a very big project. And there is that. The next piece comes from CNBC. CNBC is a commercial NBC system. We have a picture of the map showing the route of the Nord Stream pipeline. There is Nord Stream 1, which is currently in operation delivering gas to Germany. And there is Nord Stream 2, which is basically about finished and ready to go, but it has not been permitted to deliver gas to Germany yet. And the title of this article is Why Europe is So Dependent on Russia for Natural Gas. The European Union is especially dependent on Russian energy, which is becoming increasingly unsustainable. The Washington Post reported the EU is making plans for energy independence from Russia, citing anonymous sources. The plan is expected to be announced next week. And there have been a string of announcements talking about what the European Union is going to be doing about the invasion of the Ukraine. Basically, what it comes down to is Russia is weaponizing energy, which means that, and it's been doing this for some time, before the invasion of the Ukraine, they have been using energy as a weapon. They want to get benefit out of the use of this energy as a weapon. And I suspect that a large part of the reason why they invaded the Ukraine is because they are worried about the Ukraine and the pipelines that go through it, and think that those pipelines are not secure enough for their point of view. But the problem that they've got here is Russia is dependent on, Europe is dependent on Russia for natural gas, but Russia is even more dependent on Europe for the money that it gets from the sale of natural gas. And it's altogether possible that the European sale of gas and oil to Europe is going to be reduced enough that they're going to make less money after this invasion than they did before. If that happens, then it may produce a situation where their ability to make wars or their desire to make wars is reduced. And I should point out that anytime you've got a fossil fuel, you've got a supply system that can be shut off by politics, by international problems, by all sorts of things. Anytime you've got a nuclear plant or nuclear plants, you've got the same exact thing. The nuclear industry in the United States is very dependent on Russia as a source of supply for its nuclear fuel. And, this is a serious problem for the United States as we go forward. So we want to make sure that we don't have them weaponizing nuclear and oil and gas against other people. On the other hand, we can weaponize renewable energy by installing it and reducing our dependence on their products. Okay, the next item here is there's a picture of offshore wind power with a ship, which is a supply ship for these wind turbines. This comes from Verve Times. I'm going to put myself up for a minute so you can see that I'm still here. The title of this article is U.S. offshore wind auction in New York and New Jersey raises a record $4.37 billion. By the way, this is the first article appearing on Saturday, February 26th. Yes, I'm in a different year too. The federal government announced a record $4.37 billion sale of 6 offshore wind leases off the coasts of New York and New Jersey. The success of the lease auction moves forward the Biden administration's goal to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. This is a very big sale, and the wind turbines and the various support infrastructure could be put in fairly quickly. This is really kind of huge. The area is going to benefit from this because of jobs that are created almost immediately. And the jobs will include jobs preparing places where the wind turbine parts, the blades and the masts and so forth are created. It has already started to create those jobs for ships that are going to be going out, jobs for workers who install those wind turbines. Eventually, there will still be jobs after the wind turbines are put into use for people who are going to go out and clean them inside, make sure that they're running properly, do whatever lubrication, whatever upgrades and so forth have to be done. Occasionally, a wind turbine has the experience of being struck by lightning or something like that, and that means sometimes wind turbines have to be shut down and somebody has to climb out on the blade and make repairs to it. So there is that. Our next item, I've got a picture here of a Janus truck or Janus, and the picture was, it was hard to fit into that screen, which is why it's got a border all the way around it. This is from Clean Technica. If I made it wide enough to fill the screen, the top or the bottom would be off. The title of this article is Janus Trucks Converting Freightliner to Electricity, Seeing a Lot of Demand. Janus announced that the second fully electric registered Class 8 prime mover in Australia has hit the roads. It's exchangeable batteries. You can see the batteries. They're the 3 things that look like steps on the side. They can be pulled out with a forklift. The exchangeable batteries can be swapped in 3 minutes. So if you think about the time that it takes to fill up the diesel tank of a large truck like this, that's going to be more than 3 minutes. The swap gives the truck a range of up to 600 kilometers, which is 373 miles. And the JCM 350 Janus conversion module has 480 horsepower. So this is not a joke. This is a serious vehicle for moving materials and goods and so forth around. And with this swap configuration, it's going to be very effective, I think, in dealing with the business of moving. I think it's possible they've hit on a design here that's going to be very attractive in the future. Now, that truck, you'll notice, has a grill. And the reason it has a grill is because it's a conversion from a diesel vehicle. The grill was already there. But it's interesting to me that they can actually take an older, meaning maybe in this case 3 or 4 years old, I don't know, but take a diesel and turn it into an electric vehicle. Okay. Our next item comes from The Guardian, And for this, there's a picture of wind turbines. I'll put that up. The title is, "This is How We Defeat Putin and Other Petrostate Autocrats." Along with its military machine, control of oil and gas supplies is Russia's main weapon. Now, I've just said that's a weapon that can be used against it, and it will be. Now is the time to remind ourselves that the costs of solar and wind power have dropped by an order of magnitude in the last decade. We have a way to reduce Putin's power. Get off oil and gas. And that, I think, is true. I would suggest that we have other things that we could do. And one thing that occurred to me is that maybe it would be reasonable to pass a law saying that, to the effect that an aggressor state is not allowed to profit from its aggression, which means that if the Russians were going to sell us oil or gas, they could not sell it at a price higher than, it would be a price that would be decided on, maybe based on what the average price was in the period of 2015 to 2020. It wouldn't have very much effect if the United States did that, because the United States doesn't buy oil and gas from Russia. But if other countries followed suit, the Russians are very, very, very vulnerable here. If the rest of the world decides that it's not going to deal with Russia, and to a certain extent it has, Russia is going to run out of money to run its military, because that military is very highly dependent on the income that Russia gets from foreign trade. Okay, we're up to Sunday, February 27th, and we have an article from The Hill, and the picture here is the Zaporizhia, and I have not checked the pronunciation, so I could be getting that altogether wrong. But that nuclear power plant, which you see there, it has 6 reactors, and it is the biggest plant in Europe, the biggest nuclear plant. And the title of the article is, "Russian Military Threatens Ukraine Nuclear Power Plant." The Russian military is threatening a nuclear power plant in the Ukraine amid ongoing invasion of the country. Russia's military presence has increased near the Zaporizhia. This name has the curious configuration of consonants where ZH appears. That is 2 copies of ZH. And that's probably easy to pronounce, but it's a little weird for the eye of a person who has no experience with Slavic languages. Nuclear power plant, it is in the Zaporizhia region. The Ukraine Ministry of Internal Affairs reported this, and in fact, I can tell you that, this is from The Hill, in case I haven't said that already, the Russians have taken control of that particular power plant. There was a fairly concerted effort by local citizens to stop them by putting trucks and tires and so forth in the road and lighting things on fire, but they didn't sabotage the plant. They don't want that plant sabotaged. They don't want it under Russian power, but they certainly don't want it sabotaged. All right, we're still on Sunday, I think. Let me check that. Yes, we're still on Sunday, February 27th, and we have a picture here of a Tesla at a house. And this article comes from Clean Technica. I was surprised, by the way, speaking of Tesla. There was an article that appeared today, that I think it was today. If it comes up later in this broadcast, I will apologize, which says that Elon Musk, who is the head of Tesla, actually paid a little over $11 billion in taxes last year. So if you think that the rich people in this country are not paying taxes, that may be true for some of them, but it's not true for Elon Musk. This article is from Clean Technica, and the title of it is Gas Cars Produce More Supply Chain Emissions Than EVs, according to a Yale University study. EVs offer lower emissions on the road, but some skeptics criticize the mining, manufacturing, and charging practices. A study shows how minuscule the lifespan emissions of EVs are, especially when compared to those of fossil fuel vehicles. And this is something that has always bothered me, because if you look at these cars, the EV and the fossil fuel cars, the EVs are far simpler in every respect but one. And that one is they have huge batteries. So the question is, what investment have we got in terms of the ecology and environment and human rights, perhaps, in those batteries? And what the Yale University study says is that the carbon footprints and the ecological damage done by fossil fuel-based vehicles is very high compared to electric vehicles. And so there you have it. The next item is from Renew Economy. And that picture, I was surprised by this. That picture is a farm in Queensland. And it didn't come with the article. It was one that I found. I wanted to get a picture of Queensland countryside. And that picture looks to me like it could have been taken looking across the Pioneer Valley or something like this in Massachusetts. And, you know, this is very green farmland. And I always think of Queensland, any part of Australia really, except Tasmania, as being dry. But in fact, Queensland and New South Wales and Victoria, those states that occupy the eastern seaboard of Australia, have green territory between the ocean and the range of mountains that runs a ways from it in the inland. This is from Renew Economy, and the title is Forrest. Forrest is the name of a person, Forrest outlines plans for a $3 billion wind, solar, and battery hub in Queensland. Iron ore billionaire Andrew Forrest has unveiled plans for a $3 billion wind, solar, and battery storage hub in central Queensland. $3 billion, by the way, is in this case in Australian currency. So it's about $2.25 billion in American dollars. He said the proposed project would create the biggest renewable energy precinct in the southern hemisphere. Well, yeah, these projects just keep getting bigger and bigger. And they really do. And when a person decides that he's going to put $3 billion or $2.25 billion or whatever he's going to put into it, $1 billion sounds like a lot of money. And in fact, it kind of is. It's a lot of money. Okay, the next item that we got is from not Renew Economy, that was that one, Renewables Now. And this is a picture of a wind farm. I have no idea where that wind farm is. However, the title for this article is Renewables Provide 21% of U.S. electricity in 2021. With strong growth of solar and wind power, electrical generation by renewable energy sources provided 21.02% of total U.S. electrical generation in 2021. This exceeds U.S. Energy Information Administration forecasts, according to a Sunday campaign analysis of the EIA data. And I have to apologize on this. I really should have looked at it to determine how much of the solar in that was rooftop solar, because the Energy Information Administration has in the past had a tendency to ignore rooftop solar, or actually a lot of, not just rooftop, but other solar systems too, because they had a cutoff on the systems that they would include in their data of 1 megawatt. And over 98% of the, and I mean this literally, I'm not making that figure up. This is what I've read from from various industry sources. Over 98% of the individual solar installations are well below 1 megawatt. So that means that over 98% of the sources were not counted, and those smaller systems that were not counted actually account for somewhere between a third and 40% of all solar power in the United States, and that includes a lot of sites that are utility sites. With all the solar power in Vermont, until the 5 megawatt array went up on the landfill here in Brattleboro, the Energy Information Administration said that there was no solar power in Vermont at all. And that was just not the case. So again, that was from Renewables Now, and I think we should press on. Okay, we have an item from the Lowy Institute, and the title of this is Russia's War on the Ukraine Will Hasten the Drive for Clean Energy Security. Russia is a huge exporter of oil and gas, but waging war on the Ukraine will change its energy trade. It will be a short-term boost to other energy exporters. This is, in other words, Russia's invasion is a boost to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, you name it. But the bigger effect will be a fundamental rethink on energy security, which will accelerate decarbonization. The whole question of security is really, really important. And when people realize that the power plant, the gas-powered power plant that they have, or the nuclear plant that they have, can be used as a weapon against them by withholding natural gas or withholding coal, which the Russians are not really selling very much of, withholding fuel for power plants that are nuclear power plants. The Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant, if it were still going, would be subject to that kind of attack on our security. If the Russians and Kazakhstan, which is another source and is very friendly with the Russians, suddenly decided that they were not going to deliver the materials that are needed to run the nuclear plant on time. Same thing with natural gas. It's kind of hard for them to weaponize our wind turbines and our solar farms. We can weaponize them by installing them. We can say, okay, we're installing this because we want to be more secure. And that really does kind of, well, it weaponizes renewable energy. Aside from that, there's not really much of a way to do it. If we install it, that means that the Russians are put in a kind of a pickle, because it means that they would have to have fewer and fewer and fewer customers for their fuel that they're selling. But that's the nature of the game. Okay, the next item, I'm going to put me up for a minute, if I can only figure out. Tom loses the cursor for this thing sometimes, and it's really easy to see why. It's because it's invisible. Okay, I won't do it. The next item is from Reuters. And the title of this is a solar PV. This is actually, that looks like it might be one module, but in fact, that is 8 modules across, and I don't know how many long. That is a huge system. It doesn't look huge. This is from Reuters, as I said. The title is Germany aims to get 100% of energy from renewable sources by 2035. I believe, reading this article, that they don't really mean energy, they mean electricity or electrical energy. Germany aims to fulfill its electricity needs with supplies from renewable resources by 2035, compared to its previous target to abandon fossil fuels, quote, well before 2040, end quote. According to a government draft paper that has been obtained by Reuters, Germany is reacting to the situation where they can see that their energy security is threatened by the fact that they are dependent on natural gas from Russia. And that's a very serious problem for them. And they have also, in addition, a view that they should do something about the fact that Russia has invaded the Ukraine. And that means that they want to do something to discourage Russia from doing that again, or even continuing that operation. And one of the first things they did was to refuse to give a license to the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline, which is something that just infuriated the Russians. But there's a lot more going on. There's a lot of big companies that are withdrawing from Russia. They're declaring resources they've got in Russia as basically failures and moving out. In some cases, trying to sell them. And in other cases, just abandoning them. So the Russians are hurting as a result of this. Okay, we are up to Tuesday, March 1st, and we have an item here from Clean Technica and a photograph of Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General of the United Nations, addressing the United Nations. I don't know when that picture was taken. It might have been in 2019 or something like that. The title of the article is IPCC 6. Let me repeat that. IPCC 6 shows a, quote, criminal abdication of leadership, end quote, says the UN Secretary General. Now, let's think about this. Bloomberg Green reports that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said about the IPCC report, IPCC. Now I'm seeing why I said that wrong. It's because it appears wrong in this thing I'm reading. Quote, with fact upon fact, this report reveals how people and the planet are getting clobbered by climate change, end quote. He called it an indictment of a, quote, criminal abdication of leadership, end quote. And of course, that criminal abdication of leadership is a criminal abdication on the work that has to be done to stop climate change. And if the UN is going to take this position, well, it would mean that maybe we're going to see people brought to justice for things that are being done, have been done in the international courts. There are various people, including people in the State Department of the United States, who are saying that what Putin is doing in the Ukraine is a crime against humanity and could be tried in the courts in Brussels for the United Nations, where they try courts of crimes against humanity. I think that it would be worthwhile for people who haven't given it thought and have done things to stop us from getting to deal with climate change. It would be worthwhile if they would think about their own futures if they're going to try to obstruct the change. Okay. The next item is from Clean Technica, and it shows the picture is a picture of Nissan EVs. It's a Nissan image. The title is Nissan will spend $500 million on Mississippi factory for EV production. That's the end of the title. Nissan said in a press release that it will spend $500 million to make a factory in Mississippi ready to produce electric vehicles. The company plans to make 40% of its U.S. sales battery EVs by 2030. The Canton, Mississippi factory has been in operation for almost 2 decades. So they're taking a plant that is currently in operation, and they're going to spend $500 million making it into a plant for EVs only. And that is going to be an interesting thing to see happen. Okay. We have a picture now of a tanker. That's an oil tanker, I believe. That particular picture was taken in Istanbul. Not that Istanbul has anything to do with this article. The article is from CNN, and the title is Shell follows BP out of Russia as UK oil companies abandon Putin. Shell is getting out of Russia. The company said it would dump its 27.5% stake in the Sakhalin-2 liquefied natural gas facility, its 50% stake in a project to develop the Salim fields in western Siberia, and its 50% interest in an exploration project in the Gidan Peninsula of Siberia. So Shell is leaving, Royal Dutch Shell, which is a British-Dutch company, is leaving Russia because the Russians invaded the Ukraine. And this is just one of many things that I suspect will make the Russians hurt and possibly even rethink what they're doing. Okay, we are up to Wednesday, March 2nd, and we have a picture of a forest fire here in California. And this is a report from The Hill. It's called 5 Takeaways from the UN Climate Report. The UN's Climate Science Panel issued a report detailing both the impacts of climate change and potential adaptation measures society can take to mitigate the damage. The report warned of dire impacts from climate change, and this particular article has 5 of those impacts. It talks about 5 of them, but there are others. One thing that this particular report does do is, for the first time, it comes from as a report from the United Nations. It's not just reporting what climate change will do. It is reporting the measures that have to be taken in order to deal with climate change. And those measures are, this means that unlike the earlier reports, this one will talk about how much it'll cost to raise dikes around Manhattan Island to prevent it from getting flooded, or do the same thing with Miami. There are areas that can't be protected from flooding. And my recollection is that Miami may actually be one of them. Miami is putting almost $500 million into a project to put protections up, barriers for high water. But those barriers will not be effective after about 2050. So this is a very iffy project, and it's not easy. Okay, and you can go to the go to the sites that I had talked about before and see what's actually going on. Again, the file as a text file is on the site that you're looking at probably, and a link to the article, the list of articles with the photographs and so forth is also available down below the image that you're looking at. Okay, we have another report from the Hill, and in this case we have a picture of solar panels. This picture had me kind of perplexed. If you look at the panel that is most to the left, which is only partly there, it looks like it's got blotches of ice crystals, growing on it. The one to the right of that looks like it's got ripples on it from some kind of bumps, and the one to the right of that also does, higher up. As I looked at the sky, I realized that all of that I just described is in fact reflections of little clouds that are up in the sky. This is from Renews. The title of the article is SB Energy places 1.5 gigawatt PV order with First Solar. SB Energy Global, a subsidiary of SoftBank Group, has placed a multi-year order for 1,500 megawatts of First Solar's advanced ultra-low carbon thin film photovoltaic solar modules. The SB Energy will deploy these PV modules across its 4 gigawatt solar and storage development pipeline. So basically, it has made an order for 1.5 gigawatts of PVs, and there it is. This order is so big, it boggles the mind. Now, these are in fact thin film solar panels, which are not the kind of solar panel that is normally put up on somebody's roof or backyard in Vermont. The thin film panels have a very different chemistry, and they are very, very light, and they are called thin film for a reason, and the reason has to do with the fact that they have a thin film. And they're not likely to be used in Vermont. They are likely to be used in other places because they have advantages in certain places. But there is that. Now we're up to the last article. This article appeared in Clean Technica, and it's about Waymo, which is in fact a subsidiary of the company that owns Google, which, as a person who doesn't remember names very easily, I will tell you that I forget what the company that owns Google is called these days. But the title on this is Waymo to start charging robo-taxi passengers in San Francisco. After years of operating only in a corner of Phoenix, Waymo branched out to San Francisco in 2020. Oh dear, yawning, that's not a good sign. In 2021, it hasn't been changing. It hasn't been charging for its robo-taxi service in San Francisco, but that's about to change. Waymo will charge riders, in the San Francisco area real-life money to get a ride. So monopoly money won't work, and I don't think bitcoins will work, but nevertheless, if you want a ride, you're going to have to pay for it. And this is, many people say, kind of the future of car transportation. people who live in a place like San Francisco are no longer going to need a car because they'll be able to call up Waymo or one of the other companies that is in competition with it and say, I need a car. I'm at such and such an address. And the car will come, and what they'll do is they'll dispatch the nearest car to you that they have, that it makes sense to dispatch. And the result of that is that you can get a taxi service that is relatively inexpensive. And that in turn means that you might not need a car at all, which even if the taxi service is somewhat expensive, could cut your expenses enormously. So this is a very positive, development if you look at it from that point of view. Now, from another point of view, the question is it going to be safe for cars to be driving around without drivers in them? I will tell you, I am sitting here yawning and thinking to myself, it would be almost impossible for a robotic vehicle to be less safe than I would be right now behind the wheel of a car because I'm being so sleepy. Nevertheless, here it is, and the data that we have about these cars and their future, and the tests that have been run on them indicate that they are significantly less likely to get into an accident than a vehicle that's driven by a human being. And the idea that a human being can fall asleep is a very real concern. The idea that a human being can have distractions that take his attention off of the safety of his driving, the fact that some people are not interested in driving safely. In fact, they want not to drive safely because safely is boring. And there are many reasons why human beings don't drive safely, and the Waymo is susceptible to just about none of them. It would be something that I would feel a little bit leery of, I think, the first time I drove in one, or possibly the second or third, or even the 200th or 300th. But nevertheless, I think that it has been shown to be significantly safer than human driving. And so we will have to see how that all develops. Now, we are getting to the end of the show. And so what I want to do here is put up the last slide, which says, have a properly nifty week. And my mouse for there we go. The mouse for the changing the pictures there, which is the one that Tom always has trouble with, apparently has a low battery, because each time I've been unable to use it, if I switched it off and then on again, it has come back to life. However, I want to just kind of wave goodbye, and I'm sure that Tom is giving you a virtual wave at home. We did try to get him in on a Zoom call for this, and it was an attempt that didn't really work very well. I think that he was a little bit too far under the weather to do that even. But hopefully, he called me this morning and said that he did not think he could make it in because he has back pains. So hopefully he will get over that and be ready and raring to go next week. And in the meantime, I hope you have a lovely week, a properly nifty week, and hope that you'll come back for the next show. Bye.